So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Victoria Raish. I hope I said that right. Also goes by Tori. Tori is the online learning librarian at Penn State University. Great school. She has a PhD in learning design and technology from Penn State and a master's in secondary science teaching from the University of Southern California. In her role at Penn State, she is responsible for creating and implementing the services, instruction, and communication strategy with all stakeholders involved with World Campus. So that's pretty awesome. So Tori, whenever you're ready, all you have to do is unmute yourself and get started.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay, but if not, just let me know. I'm just going to answer that question quick before we start. Opening Canvas has nothing to do with Zoom. I just mean the course I created is open to people outside of Penn State and Canvas, so I'm going to provide the link to Kelly, and she'll be able to add that to the archives for the webinar. So this presentation goes over the process that the team went through to create a course for asynchronous librarians, embedded librarians, why the course was created, the purpose that the course serves, the content in the course, some critical course decisions, and how I went about collaborating with other instructional designers to create this course. And so I have some built-in discussion points. We will definitely have time at the end for a back and forth discussion. I'm hoping to hear a little bit more about what other people do for online embedded librarianship. But if you just want to start while I'm beginning the presentation, in the chat box, if you just want to pop in, if you are embedded in an online course, if you run an embedded program in an online course, you can just feel free to chat that as I continue the presentation. So I mentioned this a little bit in the introduction, but this is the agenda for today. So I'm going to go over how the course was designed, kind of the partnerships that I made to make the course happen and a success, how I decided assessments in the course, why it was important to pilot test it, kind of how long the course takes, the decisions to make it cohort-based or individual, and how to personalize the course but still make it scalable, which also is a key question of any online learning. So that question kind of came through in the course design and also was an influence in me developing the content for other librarians who are going to be embedded in online courses. So anyone who has spent any period of time at all in learning design, instructional design, has certainly heard of Wiggins and McTighe at this point. They do backwards design, and it is fairly commonplace now, I would say, driven from clear learning objectives, really focusing on what you want students to get out of a lesson. I'm actually fairly critical of this design because I think that, I'm not going to get too much into theory here, but I think that when you do backwards design, it can lead to a very linear learning experience, and it could eliminate kind of that discovery layer or students engaging in ill-structured problem solving and multiple solutions because you can become too focused on your end results. That's called backwards design. Wiggins and McTighe write about it. And you can become too focused on your end result and not as much about the process of learning for students. But for this particular purpose, I have a clear need. I had a clear need. I had what I needed the subject librarians to get out of this course and our Commonwealth Campus librarians as well. And so I'm just going to contextualize Penn State a minute for the Commonwealth Campus librarians. So we have our main campus at University Park, but we have 24 Commonwealth campuses across the state, and we all fall under the motto of one university, geographically dispersed. So in addition to the subject liaison librarians that we have here at University Park, I try to involve many of the campus librarians in this program, the embedded librarian program that I coordinate, to get them involved with our rural campus student population as well. So that's why backwards design I felt was a really good choice for designing this particular course. So the gist of backwards design is to identify your desired results and then determine kind of what assessments are going to be suitable for that result. And based on your big idea, your desired result, and the assessments that you're willing to accept to show student competency or learner competency, you can then plan your learning objectives and activities. So this model drove the course development that I worked on with an instructional designer. So many of us, even myself, even though I deal mostly with online students, I still do one-shot residential teaching for the department that I work with. So these are, to me, jump out as some of the large differences between one-shots and sustained and online involvement. And if you can think of any more, feel free to chat and contribute while I'm going over these and talking a little bit. But it's a big change at Penn State for liaison librarians and subject librarians and campus librarians to move from their one-to-one instructor-librarian relationship to a team-based approach to learning, which online learning is definitely more of a team than the traditional residential setting is. So I was having to spend several hours in meetings with subject librarians who were being embedded for the first time in online courses, going over some pretty basic stuff about online learning, which to me is old hat because I've been doing online learning for 8 or 9 years now. Started with my very first online class was Organic Chemistry 2, which I don't recommend that anybody takes online. But I've been doing it for a long time in a lot of different capacities. But for these subject librarians and the campus librarians, they have a lot of deep expertise in their subject, but they're not as familiar with kind of the new learning environments that students are in. And I attended Natalie Bennett's session about the ACRL standards for distance learners, which I also use to guide my integration and my plan for integration of library resources for our distance students. And so I really focus on that equivalent access piece. And so this provided an equivalent service that rural campus students were not getting involved, which is really the impetus behind getting more librarians involved in online learning beyond just myself. So I think that there is real benefits to being involved over the course of a semester. So you're more aligned with the syllabus, the overall course objectives, and you really get to know, especially semester after semester, you really get to know what's expected of the students, what kind of library instruction would be most helpful to the students, and how you can propose ideas to the faculty for integration within the course, because you know the course, you know where students struggle, and you can identify, even if the faculty member doesn't really know that they're talking about some aspect of information literacy that librarians can help with. You can see underlying, when you're in that course for the whole semester, you can see proactively where library instruction might really benefit those students. I know that when I teach one-shots, we know the assignment that we're teaching towards. It's 50 minutes, and we tell students, we encourage them to come see us afterwards for more in-depth research consultations, where being embedded online at the start of the course through the whole semester really flips that model and makes it proactive support for students rather than reactive support for students. So I started in this position in January of 2016, and I was just finishing up my PhD at that point. And prior to that, I was a graduate assistant in the libraries doing digital badge work. So I had made some inroads and some relationships with librarians before I even started officially in this role. And one of the very first projects that kind of got off the ground running that turned out to be successful was this embedded librarian program. So to advertise the program, I send out a newsletter to designers, faculty, program planning managers, advisors, and other librarians. So I sent out this newsletter. And in the newsletter, I said, hey, this is one of the programs I'm kind of thinking of. This is the purpose it can serve. If you're interested in something like this for your course, you can email me and let me know. So from that newsletter, I got 2 designers who teach political science courses to email me and say that they were kind of interested in this, which happened to be really good because at the same time that happened, I was doing some curriculum mapping, and I identified the Bachelor of Science in Political Science as an area that students are expected to do some pretty intensive research that returning adult online students most likely did not have the capacity to do well without library assistance. It's been a long time they've been away at school, right? The library looks totally different now. These databases, web resources might not even existed when they were using the library in their previous schooling, or this is their first time in college and their first time to online learning. So when this program started in the political science program, I basically was the walking, talking version of this course. And so that got not sustainable very quickly, even with only a few librarians being embedded. Because as I mentioned, it's complex, it's different, it's new for subject librarians and campus librarians, and it can be challenging to figure out what your role is in the course. And there are tons of resources, especially at Penn State, for instructors who are going to be teaching online for the first time, but there are not a ton of resources for people who hold roles other than instructor, right? So instructional designers, they don't need much development in terms of learning how to teach and design for online. That's what they were educated in. But librarians, who often serve as these key collaborators in support for in-person courses, had to figure out what their role was in the online environment and what my role was and how we worked as a team together. So after going to a few of these meetings, I thought, I really just need to get this material, the brunt of the material that I was going over in these meetings over and over again, into a course that librarians can take prior to becoming embedded. And then I can offer deeper support, advanced support, and we can do more because I don't have to go over this introductory stuff when we start our relationship with being embedded. So there are some things I think that the online environment does really well. So if you've ever taught a face-to-face class, you know, or a credit class, that there are some students in some classes, period, that do not talk. This is particularly present on a Friday afternoon at like 4. So they don't want to be there. They don't necessarily see the purpose of coming to the library. Their friends aren't participating. They don't want to participate. And so, right, there are strategies you can do in the classroom to encourage participation, get assessment, get feedback. But in the online environment, you can, in advance, you can design for articulation of thinking. So I really like a book chapter in the Cambridge Handbook of the Learning Sciences. Krachik and Blumenfeld from the University of Michigan write it, and it's about externalization and articulation of student thought. And so the online environment makes it easy to kind of understand what students are thinking, because there are many, many opportunities to design in advance to prompt for students' articulation of their thinking. So just to give, the book title is the Cambridge Handbook of the Learning Sciences. The chapter I referenced is the 2006 version. They have a new edition out, but it's all about the learning sciences, so there's gonna be similar content in the new one as well. Yep, no problem. So just to give a brief example of kind of what this looks like in the online environment with librarians is I have a embedded librarian who is going to be embedded. They've been planning the course, and a Holocaust course, a history course. And we were kind of brainstorming ways that we could get students to externalize their thinking. And so the solution we came up with for this particular course is that there is a required discussion board activity that the librarian runs. And in the discussion board, it's a no risk, no fail, low stress environment to participate in. Nothing's wrong. Students have to post, here's your assignment, the assignment they're given for their course. Tell me the first resource you would consider using for this assignment. So, right, that gets students to activate their prior knowledge. It gets them to kind of articulate where they're thinking, and it builds a relationship with the librarian almost immediately in the course, right? Because they can post that before they have to do any sort of research for the course. We're just asking them, okay, based on your previous search strategies, based on your previous source knowledge, where would you go first to look for information, or what's the first resource that you would consider reliable for this particular assignment? And that really sets the tone off for sustained librarian involvement in the course and the ability to kind of scaffold throughout the course with different assignments, discussion boards, pages, wikis, those sorts of collaborative tools that are used so often in the online environment. So as I was going through and kind of thinking through the process of creating this course, I imagine some of you might be interested in how the course was actually created, the process of creation. Right, just as I tell the embedded librarians who are going to be embedded, and I myself am embedded in a couple courses, but my instruction focuses more on the foundational learner. So I really needed to leverage my colleagues' expertise with subject-specific, higher-level information literacy, database-specific concepts that I didn't have the wherewithal to take on or the knowledge to do well. So I really emphasized to the embedded librarians, hey, you need to collaborate. You no longer can just work with one faculty member. We need to think at the program level. We need to think programmatically about this. And so just as I tell them they have to collaborate, I also needed to collaborate on the development of this course. So we're really lucky at Penn State that we have a really robust instructional design community, instructional designers, to support virtually all online courses and several resident courses. And so there's an instructional designer who does a lot of library related building of content. And so in addition to helping me, this instructional designer also can help other librarians. And right now she's helping our copyright officer think through some Captivate modules for putting copyright and fair use into courses. So that resource was there, and so I needed to use that. So she gave some suggestions for possible assignments and really helped to design and format the course, right? So I have the education to do that. I could have done that to design the course, but that wasn't really my role in the process. My role really was as content expert. I knew what the embedded librarians needed to be successful in these online courses, and she knew how to design that. So that relationship worked really, really well. The other collaboration that came out of this is if you're more than welcome to take my course if you're interested in something like this, tweak it, build it, adapt it for your institution. But as I was creating the course, I wanted a few videos made. And anyone who makes multimedia knows that it's harder to revise than text. You want to keep it current. And there needs to be a purpose for creating the video, right? So my design philosophy is text first, then build multimedia. So through that process, I realized that kind of a video to set off what it means to be an embedded librarian for a few different audiences would be beneficial. So in here, this link goes to the Embedded Librarian series of videos, which I can show you just a minute of, so you can kind of get a sense of how they were structured. But originally, and this is where you need to be flexible in your course design, originally I went to one multimedia shop on campus and was given a quote of about $50,000, the cost for making two to 3 minute videos. And I was like, that is my budget for the year for trying things with rural campus students, with our distance students, and for collections. So that's not going to fly. But I still really wanted these videos created. So I looked for other partnerships across Penn State. And once again, I'm really lucky. It's a resource-rich institution. So I found a multimedia studio in Filippelli Learning Design. And this learning design shop was actually the one who runs the political science course. So they were, jumped on board the embedded librarian program, and they were able to create the video series for me at no cost, just with acknowledgement, kind of attribution and recognition of what they did for the program. So this video series, which also it's right specific to Penn State, but you can definitely, it's not going to work in Chrome. You can definitely take it and run with the ideas if you're interested in something like that, or just use it if you want to, if you haven't done embedded librarianship before and you want to kind of show the value, to use it with your Center for Teaching Excellence, Teaching and Learning Technology, other faculty, librarians, So I'm just going to play just a minute of this so you can kind of get a sense of what we talk about.
Welcome, and I would like to thank you for joining our conversation about the Embedded Librarian program at Penn State. My name is Tori Raish, and I am the online learning librarian at Penn State. In that role,
I'm going to let it load for a minute. So the video has 4 different playlists in it. So we created a section just introducing the program. We created a section for librarians who are going to be embedded to kind of tell them what it's like to be embedded, a section for instructors and instructional designers to learn what the program can do, and a section that's placed into courses that tells students how they should be using their librarian. So it's not.
I serve to increase awareness, use, and expertise within the Penn State community about library resources, service, and instruction for all Rural Campus students, faculty, and staff. I'm joined here today by Emily Moras. Emily is one of our embedded librarians involved in the political science program, and she's going to now introduce herself and tell you a little bit about what she does.
I'm Emily Moras. I'm the Business and Public Administration Librarian at Penn State Harrisburg, where I serve the students in the School of Business and the School of Public Affairs, which includes a lot of World Campus students, especially in our Homeland Security program. I have a master's degree.
So that kind of gives you a sense of what we talked about in the video and the purpose that that video shows. Okay, so this is like the pinnacle question for any kind of informal, non-required learning for anyone, not just students, right? So how many times, I can't even tell you how many times I started a MOOC, and I was like, yeah, I really don't have time to finish this, but I really like to. So my question, bouncing off the field of dreams, is if you build it, will they come? So I could go through all this work to design this course, but how do I get subject librarians and campus librarians to want to take something like this, to want to devote their time to taking a course? So there's some critical course decisions that I made to increase the likelihood that they will take the course. But in addition to those course decisions, there are also some strategic initiatives at a broader level for me to encourage librarians to take this course. So what is their motivation for taking it, right? So I'm going to briefly touch on some of these points and how I dealt with getting librarians to want to complete this course and complete this professional development. So support first. This is supported by myself. I am the facilitator of the course. So I have some interactive assignments built in, some active learning built in, and as librarians go through and complete the course, I regularly engage with them, kind of ask questions, scaffold their understanding, anything that a good teacher in an online learning environment would do, communicate well, post announcements to the students, email the librarians, kind of check on their progress, those sorts of things. The goal. There is a goal in that if a librarian wants to be embedded in an online course, they need to complete this series before they become embedded. Now, that does not make this required, because they could look at this as a roadblock and say, actually, I don't want to be embedded, right? But they've already identified that they're kind of interested in being embedded in an online environment. So it encourages them to complete the course. In terms of a challenge, I really tried to build content that was going to take them beyond where they are now. So introduce them to librarianship and online learning, which they might not have been familiar with before. Introduce them to our Rural Campus students. They might not have known that demographic before. And then it's obviously professional development. So that's very easy to understand. And with the professional development, I got an administrative support. So librarians who complete this course are able to get a personalized certificate at the end of it. I use Qualtrics to send them a personalized certificate after they successfully complete the final assessment and the feedback for the course. And they can put that certificate into digital measures, which is our evaluation system for narrative, tenure, promotion, those sorts of ranks. So I had to make some critical course decisions throughout this course, which I realize is a little redundant, but I needed to decide if I was going to make the modules optional or required, right? So when you complete any kind of institutional review board training, you likely have a specified number of required modules, and then you can do some optional modules. So we started off the course making the modules optional. The librarians were going to have to complete 6 of 9. So there's 9 total modules in the course. And then as we were going through the assessment, right, so we had the big idea. We're like, okay, we're going to do these. This is our big idea. This is what we want students to get out of it. And at that point, we said, well, we can make this optional because we really just want them to get what they're missing. But then we went to the next step of the design process and realized that in our assessment, we actually want to assess holistically, the whole course, how it worked as a sequence, how it worked cohesively to build these librarians' professional development. We went back and decided to make the modules required. So another decision we had to make was the length of the course. So I did not want to make this extremely time-consuming for the librarians, but I wanted to build in that really good content and get them thinking in ways about online embeddedship that they hadn't thought of before, and deliver everything that I was saying in those face-to-face one-on-one meetings in a more scalable place. So the length of the course is about 3 hours. It takes about 3 hours to get through the course. You can come and go as you please. It's a flexible learning environment. I needed to decide if I wanted the course to be individual or cohort-based. So offering the course cohort-based, yeah, I can turn off the webcam. Sorry, I just popped the chat back up. Okay, let me know if that's better. So I wanted to know, right, if you make a cohort-based course, it makes collaborative learning and consensus knowledge building, those sorts of things, much easier to accomplish. But at the same time, it means that I have to find a group of librarians who are willing to take the course together at the same time and start and finish it together. So there's a lot more complication with cohort-based. So my compromise was that it's individual enrolling. So a librarian can just be added to the course and complete it on their own time within a month. They have a month given, which I have their time given to complete. It's 1 month. So from the time they start the course, I give them a deadline, or I've learned from other professional faculty development that if you don't give a deadline, then it just gets pushed back, pushed back, pushed back. So it's individual with a deadline, but there are active learning experiences built into the course. So there's a page in Canvas that the librarians can build together. I have a Flipgrid activity. So I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Flipgrid, but it's something that it's a Web 2.0 tool that I really like to use to kind of build that sense of community. And I have some discussion board postings, and we just got a site license for Piazza, which is a really nice discussion board platform. So I try to build those things in, and over time, I'm hoping to build a sense of community in the course. So as students participate, oh, awesome, Flipgrid in the fall. I love Flipgrid. So as students participate in as librarians participate in the course, I will be able to, as the facilitator of the course, do some curation over time. And librarians have just started to take the course this end of spring semester, but I'm hoping to be able to do curation over time. And right, I'm not getting like 100 librarians to take the course. So building and sending out some like updates from the course and feedback, like, hey, in this discussion board for the fall semester, these were the main takeaways. And every librarian who was in the course can kind of keep current in the course, right? I'm not going to de-enroll them once they complete. They can still see those occasional announcements and updates from the course. So another decision to make was if the course was going to be information dominant or application dominant, right? So at Penn State, I'm sure you all know our history. So once a year we have to do child sex abuse training. And so it's a very information-giving environment, right? There's not a ton of application. It's really, these are the policies. And then there are some scenarios like, okay, you see this child with bruises, like what's your next step? What's your step in the process? On the flip side, you can have something that's very application driven. So you can have about a third information giving, content giving, and then 2/3 of really applying it to unique situations and to their own environment. So the embedded librarian course is application dominant with some valuable content built in. So not everything in an application dominant environment for instructional design, not everything has to be, sorry, I'll close my Skype. In the application environment, not everything has to be a turn-in assignment, right? You can develop application-driven learning with a lot of just pauses to reflect. And how does this connect to what you thought before? So just being intentional and getting librarians to kind of think about, okay, this is how I used to teach in a one-shot session. This is how that could translate and transfer into the online environment. I mentioned briefly text or visual for the critical course decisions. So I try to be really conscientious of access and accessibility. So in my student population, I have about 20% military students. And so I try to think about what content is the most critical and build that into text because they don't have the bandwidth to stream. The other thing is with text, it's a lot easier to revise and make accessible than some multimedia resources are. So there's both in the course, right? I showed you the video series, but there's enough context in the course that if you can't watch the video series, you can still get the gist of what's going on in the course. Another thing that we all deal with every day now is when you create learning objects, what kind of licensing you put on it. So Creative Commons licensing for the course, I just wanted it, you can build upon, adapt, do whatever. So just attribute and non-commercial use of the course. And then if I was going to have any required readings. So I didn't want the librarians to have to go out and purchase the books, or more ideally, to check them out from the library, because that's where I found them, books that we use in the course. But I did want them to have those resources available that kind of guided development of the course, so I just placed them as recommended text. So this is the content of the course, and if we have time at the end and there's discussion and you want to see kind of how the course looks in Canvas, I can pop up a Canvas window. But these are the 9 modules of the course. You can see that it's split pretty evenly between what embedded librarianship is and what it means to be a librarian in the online environment. So there are some tangible outcomes of a lot of this content. So for example, in the Module 5, Online Teaching Personalizing Yourself, I actually, at the outcome of that, librarians will have developed a bio introduction as well as a video introduction. And if they don't want to do a video introduction, they can just upload some pictures instead, so that when the librarian goes into that relationship with the instructor of the course where they're going to be embedded and the instructional designer, they are able to have that outcome ready, right? They already have that artifact produced, can say, oh, here I am, you can add me to the front page of the course and introduce me with the instructor. And the reason why we encourage 2 photographs is just to kind of build that sense of relationship with the instructor. So there was a recent study that just came out that really showed how much students value the relationships that they build with their instructors and with other people they interact with at their university. And so they get to know the teacher and feel like, oh, this person really cares about me. So the 2 pictures are a professional picture, but then also a picture of a hobby that the librarian likes to participate in. So this is the license that I chose for this course. So if you're interested in creating your own course or building on my course, I just strongly encourage to think about Creative Commons because I know that another thing that librarians really like to do, maybe not everywhere, but at Penn State, is create LibGuides. So we have a lot of LibGuides. And part of the reason I think that so many get created are when it comes time for your annual review, whether your institution classifies as librarians as staff or faculty or professional staff, you can say, I've created X number of LibGuides and for this number of courses. But is that really the best use of time? Isn't it just as valuable or more valuable to build on what others have done? So I strongly, when I talk to librarians who are going to be embedded, if they create additional content for the course, license it and then share it with other librarians and let them build upon it, so that we're not all starting from scratch creating guides for every course when that might not be the best way to introduce that content to students. So I finished my dissertation last year, which is why I wrote this like this. And then when I was looking back at it today, I thought, well, that's really any complicated process. But I think designing a course is kind of like writing a dissertation, right? So I wrote my dissertation, typing, paragraph, and then I would go back and read like 5 pages earlier, and I'd say, that doesn't make any sense at all, or that doesn't work, or I didn't spell that word right. So I think that designing a course and any kind of process like that is similar. You need a lot of checks along the way and a lot of breaks, right, to go back, reflect, make sure it's synchronous, make sure it all makes sense. So pilot testing, just like you would pilot test a survey instrument or a research question tool that you would use, has been really helpful to me. So I had about 10 librarians pilot test the course before any librarian actually took it as a professional development opportunity. And so when I did this, and if you work at a smaller institution, right, you can go outside the library to find some pilot testers. But I really said, can you focus on this aspect, or can you focus on this aspect? I want to get feedback on that. And that was really helpful. And then everyone that pilot tested was able to kind of give me the feedback either in person or through email. And the content of the course really was strengthened through that. So for example, the instructional designer I worked with created one discussion board posting that was very, very business specific database. She found, Hoover suggested that she builds the assignment this way. And as I went through the course, it was like, hey, not all of us use this database. That's not going to be really relevant to us. So we were able to kind of tweak that assignment for a broader sense, a broader range of librarians than just business librarians. So course design is challenging, right? Education is challenging. So developing assessments, to me, is one of the most challenging things for me, is to really develop a good assessment that serves its purpose, that doesn't take too much time to assess, but really reveals a lot of student learning. So this is the assessment triangle that I really resonate with, this assessment triangle, because just like backwards design, it's taking cognition and observations and then how you would interpret that. And it's not a linear process. It goes back and forth between all of them. So what theories of learning are you using to drive your question making, and how are you going to get evidence of this? And then how do you interpret the evidence that you're given? So within the course, there's various kinds of assessments. I have some formative assessments and some summative assessment, and there's open-ended assessment, and then the summative assessment is more of an auto-graded type assessment piece with a reflection. That is the part that I grade manually. So assessment is always a balance between getting what you want out of the assessment and being able to scale it to multiple people. So the final part of the formal presentation for today, and I thank you all for sticking with me as I continue to talk, is personalization and scale. So this is an ultimate question in education in general, right? I love the book by William Bowen, who is distinguished professor at Stanford, holds an administrative right now, but he wrote a book, Higher Education in the Digital Age, and compared higher education to something like a symphony. No matter how tech advanced we get, it's very, very hard to reduce the labor cost of education. And right, people have tried throughout history. I'm not sure how many of you research MOOCs or like to look into MOOCs, but in the 1920s there was something known as ROOCs, so radio open online courses, and at that time it was predicted that those would replace the teacher, right, these radio open online courses. We've come a long way. Technology is a lot more interactive now than it was listening to the radio in your kitchen without any kind of feedback or interaction. But it's been proven time and time again, right, by video reels and everything else, that technology does not replace instructors or teachers. So how do we balance this personalization and scale? And I really think it's looking back at the big idea and what are the big things you really want students to get out, or librarians to get out of the content, and what can kind of be scaled a little bit, be automatic, and what deserves that personalized feedback. So the way that I like to think about this, I issue a lot of digital badges to students. The way I like to think about it with the information literacy digital badges is, if I'm asking a lot of the student, I don't want to just give them an automatic assessment. At some point, you have to make that balance between the two, but personalized feedback is something that's really valuable. And so even if it takes a little bit longer, grading takes a long time, there needs to be some balances made between between those different factors that seem to pull one another. So I have some discussion and questions, and then at the end of the PowerPoint, and we don't have to get to this today, but I have kind of just an activity for you to think through. If you were to develop your own course, what kind of questions would you have to start thinking through at the beginning of the course?